Thank you very much. My name is Howard Miller. I practice law in Los Angeles. I have had the great pleasure of being at the GIPC conferences for several years. I'm indebted to Dr. Agarwal for continuing to invite me and to come back to India. My family and I now, through 3 generations, have been coming to India for over 35 years and have watched incredibly as the country has changed and as things have opened, and come to enjoy it more and more, and especially come to appreciate this conference, which is really an opening to the mind of India and the mind of the world. In another age now happily lost, the West had the conceit that the gateway to India was in what is now Mumbai, but now the gateway to India is through the Indian mind, and the gateway of India to the world is to understand the mind of the rest of the world. I've lived in California almost all my life, and though I'm in Los Angeles, I spend a great deal of time in the San Francisco Bay Area. And as we think of innovation, despite the fact that we are lawyers, I think it's important to understand that though law is necessary for success of innovation, it is nowhere near sufficient. You can have a perfect patent system with no innovation, and you can have a great deal of innovation without any law, amazingly. So what is it that creates innovation? As I said, I'm from California. I'm very proud of that. And you ask, why is it as you go up and down the California coast, when the league tables come out for the greatest universities in the world, 3 of the top 6 are always along the coast in California: Caltech, Stanford, and Berkeley. And why is it that you can go to Sand Hill Road in Menlo Park and in the distance see the Hoover Tower at Stanford, and within a radius of 10 miles, if you can walk it or bicycle it, be in touch with the people that have created most of the innovation and created a great deal of the wealth of the world in the past generation? What is it that creates the innovation and the wealth? It is not the law. The law may be necessary to sustain wealth, but it does not create the innovation. We see it historically where there's been innovation and authorship long before there was intellectual property. There were no copyright laws in England when William Shakespeare was writing. So what is it that creates in the modern world innovation? I'll give you the example of California. It is culture. It is not law. It is not history. It is culture. And it is 2 aspects of culture that much of the world has some difficulty adapting to. The first is that there is no longer a great deal of value in either status or credentials. All that counts in the world where so many people have been educated are the quality of ideas that are developed. The Silicon Valley companies that now run innovation workshops and invite people to it have had to lower the age of the participants from 16 to 14, because even though there used to be a cutoff at 18, too many 16-year-olds were coming, and even though there's a cutoff at 16, too many 14-year-olds were coming. And no one measures what people have proposed by their status or their credentials. All that counts is the quality of the ideas that come forth. And so a 14-year-old who no one has ever heard of and shows up with something that's interesting gets widely supported, while the most credentialed person from the leading university who cannot provide real innovation is disregarded and put off to the side. So the first thing to realize is the culture must focus on the quality of the ideas that are presented and not the status or credentials of the person who proposes it. And the second element is risk-taking and the willingness to fail. It is only a culture that has a willingness to risk failure that finally succeeds in innovation, at least from what I have seen in my home state of California. Of course, failure can be a shame, but in fact, in large parts of the California innovation culture today, that someone has taken a big risk and failed is a mark of virtue and success, because it indicates a person who was willing to take a great risk if it was rational. some friends of mine were in a company that were developing mirrors for telescopes. And they had a different way, they had an idea, a different way to develop the mirrors. They called a leading company in the world who had historically produced and knew more about this than anything, told them what the idea was. The executives came and said, "This is impossible. You were wrong. You can never do it." 18 months later, of course, they had done it. They called the company, the same executives came out and said, "You know why we could never have done this? Because we knew too much. We knew it was impossible. And it was only your willingness to take the risk that people who thought they knew the most were wrong that permitted us to do this." So I think it's tremendously important, even though we focus on the law, the patent system, the intellectual property system, is vital to develop things that are developed, that the innovation does not come from the law. I don't want to put it too bluntly, but lawyers are rarely innovative. Innovation does not come from the law. Innovation comes from a sense of equality, that all that counts is ideas and not the past or status, and a willingness to take risks in order to succeed, and the development of the culture that appropriately values those who have failed because they took risks and are willing to take further risks. And that is where the world, the Indian mind, and those who seek innovation have got to bring their cultures in order to advance innovation, wealth, well-being, and success in the world. I thank you very much for continuing to invite me to be here, Dr. Agarwal.